Well, folks, it's absolutely freezing, but instead of moping in front of the fire, I've just had to get out on the bank. Like a lot of you guys, I'm itching to get out all the time, as often as I can. So I've come to one of my favourite venues, a local venue as well. It's Mallory Park, the Glebe fisheries. I've sat on a peg that I absolutely love fishing. It's the end peg on Pretty's Pool. I fish here quite a lot in the summer months. I take a lot of people coaching on this lake as well. It's a good place to get a few bites, you know, no matter what the weather. And I've just come for a simple pole session. I've just had a couple of fish. It's just time to refeed. I've got with me some really simple rigs and a really simple bait menu. Bait for today is some dark ground bait and a few dead maggots. I put some maggots in the freezer a couple of days ago just to kill them, and there might be the odd one that's still wriggling, but most of them are dead. A really simple bait menu. I've just caught a fish, so I'm just topping up with a really small amount of bait. So, the bait in detail. I'm using Swim Stim, Dynamite Bait, Swim Stim Black ground bait. A beautiful, fine ground bait, perfect for winter months. You know my motto, if it's cold, the water's clear, black ground bait. There's no other rules, it's black ground bait all the way. Mix the ground bait. As soon as I got to my peg, I want to get as much water in that ground bait as possible, so I've added a really good helping of water to a bag of the Swim Stim Black. Gave it a good mix, and then set up the rest of my kit. By that time, sort of like half hour's passed, I can go back to the ground bait and riddle the ground bait, maybe add a little bit more water, but riddle the ground bait, and it'll go from a lumpy mess to a beautifully fine ground bait. That is my feed for today. That's my main feed. But alongside that, I've got some, as I say, some dead maggots. Put them in the freezer just to soften them up. They sink a little bit slower, they're softer, a little bit more appealing to the fish. And also, I always feel live maggots are great for catching all sorts of fish, but dead maggots are better for quality fish. So I've come with some dead maggots today. It's also easy just to whack them back in the freezer today if I don't use them all. Pole rigs. Now, I'm using a 4x12 float. It's a little Malman Dusty. The main line is 014, and I've got an 012 hook length with a size 16 hook. Shotting for the rig. Now, this is something that I want to talk about because it's something that confuses a lot of people. As I say, when I take people out coaching, they don't know whether to bulk the rig, shot high up in the water, spread the shot out. It's quite a difficult subject. So, on all of my commercial fishery rigs, where I'm using thick line, I use slot shot. It's a little bit kinder to the line. Strength's important when we're targeting carp, so slot shot is the way to go for me. I can move them up and down the line nice and easily. And I always like to start a session with a slightly strung out shotting pattern, especially on a day like today where I'm expecting the fishing to be, you know, reasonably hard. A slightly strung out shotting pattern, just fish that rig through the water. Obviously, you're getting a lot of bites just as the bait settles, so that fish might watch that bait fall through the water for quite a long time. Just as that bait settles, that's when you'll get your bite. So it makes sense to have a shotting pattern that's slightly strung out. When I'm catching a lot of fish, or when I want to get the bait down quick to the fish, that's when I'll pull that shot down and bulk the shot closer to the hook. That gets the bait down quicker to the fish, but also stabilises the rig. So when you're getting a lot of fish in your peg, there's a lot of movement, a lot of fish movement, bulking that shot down is really important. Now, I don't use shot as often as I used to because I'm not fishing as many natural venues for smaller fish as I used to. But shot instead of the slot shot is the way to go for me when I'm using lighter lines, fishing for smaller fish, bulking a rig down, aiming to catch a lot of fish, and I don't want any tangles or anything like that to hinder, you know, the efficiency of me catching those fish. The reason that I like to use shot in that circumstance instead of the slot shot is because shot doesn't tend to tangle as much as slot shot. Because of the rounded edges of the shot, and obviously the spherical shape of the shot, the line doesn't get hung up on it, it doesn't twist as much through the water when you're shipping in and out at speed, so you just get less tangles with shot. So that's hopefully put a bit of confusion at rest for everyone and their shot versus slot shot dilemmas. It's time for me to put a couple of more maggots on and see if I can get a bite. The water's, although we've had a lot of rain, the water's still pretty clear. You can probably see maybe a foot down, but I've just had a couple of fish and maybe a few fish have turned up now. As I say, this lake and this particular peg doesn't really let me down, and I'm sure on a lot of commercial fisheries there's always sort of a peg like this where it's a banker swim and you just know that you're going to get out and get a few bites whatever the weather. It's a lovely looking peg. In the summer matches when they have the big events here, it never sort of wins a match. There you go, beautiful. It never wins a match, this peg, but it's always sort of in the frame. You know, the fishery is that good that there's some massive weights here in the summer, and I think just because the fish in this lake are a little bit smaller than on the rest of the complex, it's just quite difficult to put a weight together. That's probably another thing to pay attention to as well. I fed a little tiny bit of bait, and because I was rabbiting on about rigs and shotting and bait to you guys, it just let that bait settle for a little bit. Maybe let a couple of fish feel comfortable over the bait, and as soon as you drop your rig in, you get a fish. And they've not been bad fish, the ones I've been catching. Nice carp. You know, I was hoping to come and just get a few bites, really. I know there's some crucians, some tench, some smaller carp in this lake, but I've been surprised. The fish that I've caught have been nice fish. As always, no matter what time of year, I always take my time with my fish. No point hooking the fish if you're going to lose them by rushing them and bullying them. I've got pink shock core elastic, which is quite a nice soft elastic, probably rated of about a 10 to 12, something like that. And then obviously with the puller bung, you just pull out a little bit and just control how much pressure you've got on the fish. Another nice fish. The water's much clearer than you think. I could see that fish maybe a foot and a half, 2 foot down then, flashing. We've got loads of runoff. It's been raining so heavily this last week or so, but it's not affected. It's not really coloured the. There we go. It's not affected the lake too much, obviously. It's great having a venue like this. This is probably 20 minutes from my house, and you just know that you can come here, get bites, loads of different lakes to choose from. He's fighting a little bit harder now, this guy. It's always the same, when you put the pressure on them, they always fight a bit harder. There we are. Lovely fish. Lovely fish. Just hold this guy up for you. And then, look at that. Beautiful fish. We'll put him in the net, and then we'll repeat the process. Little tiny ball of ground bait, 6 or 7 maggots, and just set it up for the next fish. I'm just trying to set a trap for each fish. We don't want to blow the peg before we've started really, so just small amounts of bait. I mean, I started off the swim with a reasonable ball of ground bait and maybe 20 or so maggots just to kick-start the peg, but now we're getting a few bites. It's just about setting a trap for each individual fish. So we'll pop this little amount of feed in. And see if we can catch a few more fish. Right, so while we wait for another bite, let me just talk to you about how I've plumbed the rig up. Another aspect of fishing where people seem to struggle with is plumbing the depth. So the first thing that I like to make sure I'm doing is using a heavy plummet. I'm using quite heavy elastic. I'm fishing quite a long length of pole. I want the plummet to be a positive reading when I'm plumbing up. So I've got a 30 gram plummet, which is an ounce in old money, I suppose. I slip that 30 gram plummet on, ship out, and have a good plumb around. You know, really feel that plummet hit the bottom, get a really positive reading. And because I'm using maggots today, it means that I can just get away with laying a little bit more line on the bottom, a little tiny bite then. There's a fish there now. I can get away with laying a little bit more line on the bottom than I would say when I'm using pellets or sweet corn or something like that, where a fish really sucks it in and blows it out quite quickly. Fish do tend to hold on to maggots for a little bit longer. So what I've ended up doing, there we go. Fishing's so good now, guys. The rain's just started to come down, but the fishing is really good. So, as I say, I've put a little bit of line on the bottom. We've got a little tiny bit of wind today on the water. And because I'm using quite a light float, I'm using a 4x12 float in maybe 3.5, 4 foot of water. I just know that there's going to be some tow on the water. And I've done quite a bit of underwater filming and watched footage where a light float and a light rig tends to ride up in the water when you get a little bit of tow on the water. So he's going around the corner, this guy. So by putting a little bit of line on the bottom, I'm just making sure that my hook bait isn't rising up off the bottom in that tow. It's only an inch or so, inch or two on the bottom. I've plumbed up so the bristle and maybe part of the body's visible when I let the plummet rest on the bottom, but it just seems just the right amount of line to lay on the bottom to make sure that my hook bait is on the bottom at all times, but I'm still seeing my indications and not foul hooking too many fish as well. The cracking fish these are, beautiful fish. Let's unhook this guy and hold him up. Look at that, cracking little fish. And again, we're in a really good routine now where we're feeding that little tiny ball of ground bait. You know, sort of the size of a little marble. 6 or 7 maggots. Really taking my time as well to make sure that the bait goes in exactly the right area. I've got a lovely shadow to fish into in front of me today. And it lines up perfectly with a tree opposite, so I've got a perfect marker to feed my bait. My hands are like blocks of ice. It's absolutely freezing. And obviously with the rain just starting, it's not helping things either. But the fish definitely don't seem to mind. I think it's forecast heavy rain this afternoon, so I don't know how long we've got. See if we can catch a couple more. Trying to hold the rig as still as possible. Obviously it's quite a light float, but I've got a couple of back shot just above the float, in between the float and the pole tip, just to try and help me hold the rig still. It's strange today that the tow is pulling the opposite way to the wind. Obviously that happens quite a lot on shallow lakes. It gets affected by the tow quite easily. We've got a bit of an overflow as well to our right from one of the other lakes that's pushing some water in, so maybe that's pushing the rig away from us as well. Try and hold the bait as still as possible. A little indication then. I think there's a fish there. It's all too easy to blow your peg at this time of year. Just really take it easy with the feed. That little tiny ball of ground bait, a few maggots. We're only fishing for one fish at a time. And we've set a trap now. So if that one fish does come into the swim, he's got 6 or 7 maggots to eat, a little tiny ball of ground bait, and then hopefully he's not too full up that he doesn't eat our hook bait. The fishing's been really interesting today because it took us what seemed like an eternity to get our first bite. It's probably about 45 minutes or an hour before we had our first indication on the float. But then after that, it's been a fish every time we've dropped the rig in. We had a frost last night. It was absolutely freezing last night. And obviously fish being cold-blooded, they don't respond well to low temperatures. And it's just taken them a bit of time this morning to get going, but once they've found the feed, they've had a proper go. There's been no little fish either, all decent fish. So there's quite a few roach and skimmers and little carp in this lake, and we've not had any of those. It's all been decent fish. I think this rain is settled in for the day now. It looks pretty black over my shoulder. Which is a big surprise because it rains every day. There we go. My hands are like blocks of ice as well. So I think what we're going to do, because it's starting to rain, and I don't see the point of knackering the camera equipment and soaking my kit as well. I've had my little fishing fix for the day. I didn't fish at the weekend. I didn't have any matches at the weekend, so just to get out on the bank today is my little fishing fix for the week. I don't know about you, I don't like to leave too many days before I get out on the bank again. I've had my little fishing fix, maybe 2 or 3 hours on the bank. Caught some beautiful fish using simple baits. My hands are that cold, I'm struggling to unhook the fish. Use the disgorger. Using simple baits. A rig that's been in my tray for probably 6 months. I've had a fantastic little session. And I think that's a lovely little fish to end on. Until next time, guys, tight lines.